On a pornography mailing list. Lee Thompson with part 2 of our Dateline investigation.
A rare conversation with Woody Allen. With a new movie out, the filmmaker talks about his work.
Have you done any film that can fairly be called a great film?
Absolutely not.
About his life.
I've managed to achieve being shallow and unhappy.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And about the highly publicized upheaval in his family life.
I'm really not interested in what anyone at all has to say about my private life.
The Bob Costas interview.
Jeffrey Dahmer, the most notorious serial murderer of our time, beaten to death in prison. What made him a cannibal and a killer?
Lust played a big part of it. Controlling lust.
Dateline has exclusive home movies and Dahmer's last network interview.
Did you want to try to stop?
Now, excerpts that have never been seen until tonight.
What used to be a fantasy
Life will be richer, easier, healthier.
is becoming reality.
I would like breakfast, Nancy.
Robots whipping up waffles? Cleaning your house, doing your dishes. It's happening in a Dateline state-of-the-art. Plus, heated debate. Dateline's Picture of the Week.
Dateline with Jane Pauley and Stone Phillips, plus Tom Brokaw, Katie Couric, Bryant Gumbel, and Maria Shriver. Dateline will continue after this brief message. From our studios in New York, here is Jane Pauley.
Good evening. Not long ago, we reported on 800 phone numbers that are anything but free. Sex lines aimed at teenagers that can end up costing their parents hundreds, even thousands of dollars. In part 2 of our Dateline investigation, there's more. Parents pressured to pay. People charged for calls that were never made. Pornography sent to teenagers unsolicited. Lee Thompson begins tonight with the people who are heard but rarely seen. The real women on the other end of the line.
Hi, my girlfriends and I are dying to speak to you.
Meet Robin and her girlfriends. They turned hot fantasy into cold cash for a Las Vegas phone sex line.
I was black. I was white. I was Japanese. I come from Japan. Name is Miley. I speak very little English. We used to read books while they're talking to us, and they imagined us to be in our homes and in this very sexy lingerie. My blonde her name was Shelby, and she was from Raleigh, North Carolina, and they would just die over it, and they would lead me into fantasies of me doing a striptease act for them.
These women say they thought it was just harmless fantasy among consenting adults, but then they were reassigned. The breathless phone pals became hard-nosed bill collectors for half a dozen sex line companies.
When I went in there and I started to bill these people and started to listen to the stories, I felt like scum.
These women say sex lines use deceptive ads to trick teens into calling and dirty tricks to get their parents to pay. They think something should be done to stop it, so they agreed to share with Dateline some of the tricks of the trade.
They want that money. That money's all important.
In the sex line business, you can be billed for a call you never even made. The operators say some companies billed out-of-service phone numbers and ordered them to collect when the phone company gave the number to a new customer.
You can't make a phone call from a dead phone line.
Donna was the billing supervisor. She says people would often pay for calls they didn't make just to avoid the hassle.
We were to collect the money no matter what.
And they say there was the double billing trick, charging twice for the same call.
They are 13 days apart and 24 days apart. Identical calls with 1 second difference.
You were ripping them off, basically.
If a parent refused to pay because their underage teen made the sex line call, the parent would hear this.
We were told to tell them the phone is in your name. You are responsible for all charges to your phone. Therefore, you have to pay the bill. If you do not pay the bill, you will be sent to a collection agency, and you will have a mark put on your credit rating.
But that threat is a trick, too. In many cases, the law allows consumers to refuse to pay a disputed entertainment line call without it hurting their credit rating. Of course, if you don't even know you have a sex line call on your bill, you can't fight it. That brings us to yet another trick called masking.
The total amount of bills run well over $4,000 or $5,000 on these calls.
Masking just about drove Emily and J.W. Stansberry crazy. Someone used an 800 number to charge sex line calls to their number, and they couldn't figure out where they came from because a sex phone company masked the calls, disguised them as long-distance calls. They couldn't pay their bill. The phone was disconnected, and for them, a phone is critical.
Save your life, really. You know, that's what it's called.
J.W. has had 2 heart attacks and is home alone while Emily works. His phone wires him into a medical system that sends him help with the touch of his wristband.
It's whether he lives or dies. If I don't have the phone, he dies.
The Stansberrys are now on a payment plan, their phone service restored, some of their bills forgiven. But the operators we talked to say that the companies they billed for rarely forgave any bill.
Making people feel like they had to give me their last penny, like I was taking the food from their children's mouth. I hated that.
The owner of the company they worked for, the long-distance billing company of Las Vegas, didn't want to speak to us on camera, but told us he did give credits and his company operated within the law. But his former employees, 3 of whom were fired, showed us written orders they had to sustain as many of the customers' charges as humanly possible. They say they were told to collect even from those they knew didn't call.
What bothered you the most?
The elderly. Having to try to collect money from the elderly. People would tell you they didn't have enough food to eat, and we were told that we had to try to collect money from these people.
Did these people make the calls?
No.
Or did the company make up the calls?
A lot of them were the companies that made up the calls. I couldn't do it. I credited them. We had calls from people, paraplegics. We had people, stroke victims, mentally ill, handicapped. We were told to collect the money.
And you believe that those people never made those calls?
I do. I believe they did not make them.
Because thousands of angry phone customers have complained to Washington about these sex line deceptions, Congress and some federal agencies are now trying to crack down. But Dateline has learned many phone sex companies are already one step ahead of the law by moving beyond the reach of the U.S. government. They've moved their sleaze overseas. And many overseas calls are now advertised as free phone sex. The trick here is that technically the phone sex is free, but you pay top dollar international long-distance rates. You often access a line through an 800 number, then
please press the star key so that we may speed dial the number.
Before you know it, you're speed dialed overseas and long-distance charges start ringing up. And even if you do realize what's happening, the first minute still costs you $7 or $8.
Hi. This call connects you live, the world.
Service is available to over 185 countries, or Canada, Mexico, or a Caribbean country with an...
These Minneapolis parents told us all about it. Their kids' calls circled the globe.
Went to Hong Kong, Moldavia, Russia, Central America, and Santo Domingo.
Los Angeles, Moldova.
And almost everyone's bills showed calls to
Sao Tome.
We had to look it up. Sao Tome is a tiny island off the west coast of Africa.
Something very dirty is going on.
Its only representative in the United States is diplomat Domingos Faria. Faria doesn't think the calls even end up in Sao Tome.
Because in Sao Tome you speak Portuguese, you don't speak English.
He believes the calls are routed back to the U.S. or Canada, but the caller still pays for the international trip. But isn't it true? Your country is probably making money off of this since the phone company is partially owned by the government.
That's a very good question.
Faria told us he would investigate with officials in Sao Tome. But ironically, he'll have to do it by cable. His office in New York has had its phone disconnected. The Sao Tome government didn't have the money to pay the bill. The exotic destinations of these calls was just one of the many unpleasant surprises for these parents. Their kids had called without their permission, been exposed to explicit talk, and parents had to pick up the tab. Then adding insult to injury, an even uglier trick, pornographic mail. After his 12-year-old son made sex line calls, Tom says hardcore pornography came into his home.
And it was very explicit photography of women in just about every degrading form of activity with another woman. And it was 1-800, 1-900, and just about any four-letter swear word or sexual word you can think of.
I threw them away as soon as I got them because I had my little granddaughter, 10 years old, bringing me the mail in. And it's right there on front page.
It turns out once the sex lines have your telephone number, getting your name and address to add to their mailing list is pretty easy.
I don't think that they have a right to send me something that they don't even know if I would approve of or not.
An unauthorized call to a sex line from Ron Fithen's phone set off an avalanche of pornography, all advertising more phone sex lines. Much of it came from a company called Telephone Networks, Inc. Dateline has discovered the president of this mailer is also the vice president of the largest sex line company in the country. Our 6-month investigation of sex lines led us to this company again and again. It's one of the companies that the Las Vegas operators did some billing for, one of the companies that tried to collect from these Minnesota parents. It's the same company that the state of Florida says allegedly masked the Stansberry's phone bill. And it's run by the same people that sent porn to Ron Fithen. The company, American Telnet.
In your opinion, is American Telnet breaking Florida law?
In my opinion, yes.
Florida state investigator Alan Taylor believes American Telnet did violate state law by masking sex line calls as regular long distance. American Telnet is run by this man, Michael Partis. Dateline has learned that Partis and American Telnet are also under investigation by the Federal Trade Commission for alleged misleading and deceptive practices.
Thank you for calling American Telnet.
Executives of American Telnet and the pornographic mailer they are associated with declined to speak to us on the record, so we tried to speak to Michael Partis in person.
I'm Lee Thompson from Dateline NBC.
We wanted to ask Partis about his company's connection to the pornographic mailings and about federal and state allegations that he sent out inaccurate and deceptive bills. But as you can see, he didn't want to talk to us.
Mr. Partis, I'm Lee Thompson from Dateline NBC. We'd like to talk to you if we could.
Our Dateline investigation into the phone sex business reveals it's an industry grounded in trickery and exploitation, taking advantage of teenagers and their parents, and even people who never called a sex line. These former insiders say enough is enough.
I think the deception, the deceit should stop.
It's wrong. I think people should be aware that they're being taken advantage of. They're being defrauded.
And there's more. On Friday, tune into part 3 of our Dateline investigation. Another phone scheme. It's called a chat line. May sound innocent, but wait till you hear what can happen to teenagers who dial in. That's on Dateline Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 Central.
Later on Dateline, he was driven to kill.
I acted on my fantasies, and that's where everything went wrong.
Now he's been killed. Jeffrey Dahmer, portions of Dateline's exclusive interview that have never been seen before. Also, the key to making your life more comfortable may lie behind this door.
Would you like waffles?
That sounds good.
A robot of your own. It could happen. A Dateline state-of-the-art. When we come back, Woody Allen. A new movie, a surprising interview.
It would not mean anything to me at all if the day that I died, he took all my films and burned all the negatives.
You think we'll get out this time?
And if he hadn't made it big in show business?
What do you think would have happened to you?
Nothing. I was thrown out of college. I would have been just a one of those grumpy guys. I would have been a messenger or something like that.
Woody Allen's thoughts on a very rough period in his life.
There's the horror of that I have not been, charged with anything and yet not allowed to see my daughter for years now.
The Bob Costas interview. Here again is Jane Pauley.
If you think you know everything there is to know about Woody Allen, he says you're dead wrong. He insists he is not the character he plays in his movies, nor is he the man you've read about in the newspapers. It's been years since Woody Allen has talked on camera about his work. Tonight, with Bob Costas, he also talks about the turmoil in his personal life, how he says he's been able to ignore the tabloid headlines and stay focused on his passion, movie making.
The idea is there's plenty of air in this elevator. Larry, relax. Just don't panic, okay? Don't panic, all right?
I'm not panicking.
Just don't worry.
I'm just going to say the rosary now.
Woody Allen, the neurotic. Woody Allen, the brave. And Woody Allen, the ladies' man.
You're the greatest lover I've ever had.
Well, I practice a lot when I'm alone.
Tell me about the first time you went to the movies. What did you see and how did it affect you?
I think, and this may be one of those faulty memories, I think I saw Snow White. I think my parents took me to see Snow White, and my mother did. And I remember running down the screen, toward the screen, down the aisle, toward the screen to touch it.
You've talked about leaving the movie theater, staying in there 4 or 5 hours at a time,
right,
and then walking into the harsh sunlight, the outside world. I mean, this is not a terribly difficult metaphor to grasp. And you've negotiated that duality your whole life, right?
These movies affected me profoundly. I lived in the movie houses, and I was a sensitive kid, and they affected me profoundly, only to give me, to cause much pain in later life. It's no fun. I've never been a fan of realities. People always feel that truth is beauty, and I've never felt that way. I've always felt like Blanche DuBois, that you put the paper lanterns over the lights, and that reality is not a very nice thing at all. And you go home, and it isn't like that. I mean, it's not like it was in the movies. You don't, the elevator does not open up into your apartment.
Hey, folks, what can I get you?
2 martinis, please, very dry.
How'd you know what I drank?
Oh, you want one too?
Woody Allen's new movie, Bullets Over Broadway, has been critically well received. It's a period piece set in late 1920s New York, populated by show people and gangsters.
You shut up!
As always, there are the questions of integrity and higher purpose running through it, but it's also accessible. It's funny. Was that intentional? At this stage of your career, did you feel like you needed to make something that appealed to a somewhat broader audience?
No, I think I'm always funny when I make a comedy, and I'm always surprised at the fact that there isn't always a broad audience for it. In my own opinion, I've done films over the years, like Broadway Danny Rose and Radio Days and Manhattan Murder Mystery that are just as absolutely commercial. They're just as broad as can be. And, it's an interesting thing. The proof of that to me is when an audience comes in and sees it, they laugh. The problem for me has always been convincing them to come in and see it.
If you get you in a room, when he'll read you your Miranda rights and he'll tear your clothes off.
He's interested in producing something of mine.
Your first child.
Since Crimes and Misdemeanors, you haven't had a hit, even by the modest terms of what's a hit for a Woody Allen film. Now, Bullets Over Broadway is going to do okay, but I gather
Are we talking about a financial hit or a critical hit?
Financial hit. Critical hits you've had, but a financial hit. So do you feel that you're now at a juncture where you've got to score in some way to ensure that you get that kind of carte blanche, that you'll get that studio backing, that you'll have that artistic freedom?
No, I've never had that problem for many reasons. For one thing, none of my films, going back years, have really done that well. To its time, Annie Hall was the smallest grossing Oscar-winning picture in history. I think that as soon as you start trying to anticipate what an audience will like, you're dead.
All right, why is life worth living? That's very good.
In Manhattan, there's a scene where your character rattles off his list of the things that make life worth living?
Oh, I would say, Groucho Marx, to name one thing, and Willie Mays, and the second movement of the Jupiter Symphony.
Want to update that list?
Well, at that time, I played a father in that movie, and I got a letter from a woman that said, "You never mentioned your child." And I thought at that time I had no children, and I thought to myself, oh, some lady wrote me a letter. Then, when I had children of my own, I realized, that the lady was 100% right, and I was 100% wrong. That it was, it was just a shallow and stupid oversight of mine. The thing that would head the list would be, the children, for making life worth living, without any question.
Here's a quote I think a lot of people will find interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Apart from the difficulty in seeing your children, what's happened over the last couple of years, you say, wasn't very hard for me, strictly cerebrally. Mm-hmm. If it wasn't for the harm to the kids and the unresolved situation of not seeing them, it would have been an experience I'm not sure that I would necessarily trade. Wow, from a distance, I think most people would say, I'd rather wear a hair shirt than go through this.
Right. And people always say to me, how could you have worked throughout this and made funny movies? And I think they don't understand that what they thought was happening was what they would read or hear on the tabloid television shows. But what was really happening was not that. Of course, there's the horror of that I have not been, charged with anything and yet not allowed to see my daughter for years now. And that's a horror. But lay that aside just for the purpose of conversation for a second. This was something that took a small amount of my time each day, and my lawyers handle things, and I was able to do my films and work and, unimpeded completely.
Mr. Allen, what are you hoping for today?
2 years after authorities investigated allegations of molestation and found no basis for charges, Allen is restricted by court order to one supervised visit a week with his natural son, Satchel, and prevented from seeing his adopted daughter, Dylan.
I don't feel scarred. I feel only that a monumental, tragic injustice has been done to my daughter. And a painful thing to me, but the painful thing to me, I can weather. It's something I can handle, because I'm old enough and tough enough, and I can just do it. So, am I scarred? No, but she will be scarred.
What would you say to someone who appreciates your work, mm-hmm. wants to see more of it, mm-hmm. gives you the benefit of any doubt on all aspects of this unfortunate situation, and focuses on what you've acknowledged, which is that you have a romantic relationship with Soon-Yi Previn, and says, Woody Allen, his screen persona is a romantic character. He deals with questions of morality and God and ethics. Mm-hmm. That's part of what attracts me to him. Mm-hmm. Now, even if I don't want it to, what I know about this choice that he made mm-hmm. that I can't approve of intrudes on my perception of his work. Mm-hmm. What do you say?
I'd say a number of things. One is, I would say, what he knows about things, he's learned from the tabloid press. That's one thing. Two is, I make all decisions on my private life myself, and I'm really not interested in what anyone at all has to say about my private life. Three, anyone who makes a relationship between me and my films is making a mistake. The question is, do I want people like that to see my movies? I make them in a good spirit and, honestly to entertain people. And someone out there that's sitting in moral judgment of me and is taking the position, gee, do I want to see his film because I don't approve of his private life, I would just assume that they didn't see it.
Any
second, it's going to come right through the glass or come right into the apartment.
Alan's film persona has always seemed to be an obvious projection of Alan himself. Given that he usually writes, directs, and stars, it's reasonable then to assume his films are at least in some sense autobiographical.
You think we'd ever break up?
But Alan says no.
I don't want them to confuse the artistic choices to tell the story with my real life, because I make up anything to make the story work, anything at all. But I'm true to my sensibility.
But themes recur. I read where you expressed surprise that anyone would draw parallels between your life and what was happening with the characters in Husbands and Wives. And yet the professor leaves a character, happens to be played by Mia Farrow, winds up with going out with a student.
Right.
In Manhattan, an older guy, in effect, is teacher and boyfriend to a younger girl. These are easy leaps for the audience to make.
She's got homework. I'm dating a girl who does homework.
They're just artistic choices. I mean, Manhattan, I did many, many years ago, and it was a nice gimmick to create conflict.
She's so charismatic, and she's brilliant and beautiful. I mean, a real artist, and we speak the same language.
You don't have to be the sharpest customer in the world to kind of have your eyes open when the Rob Reiner character says,
"Guilt is petty bourgeois crap. An artist creates his own moral universe."
I know that.
And everybody says, what comment is Woody Allen offering, if any, on the events of the last 2 years with that?
None. My own feeling is the artist does not have a jot more moral leeway than anyone else. But that's just a justification to do what they want. And I feel profoundly against that. And I think I've shown that in films over the years.
What do you have faith in?
Have faith in? The power of distraction, I guess. That it is possible in this vale of tears to be distracted. You can be distracted by a romance. You can be distracted by a good movie. You can be distracted by creating something. And these distractions help you to get through life without having to spend too much time coming face to face with the situation that you're really in.
Are there moments when you envy that couple walking down the street in Annie Hall?
You look like a very happy couple. Are you?
Yeah.
Yeah? So how do you account for it?
I'm very shallow and empty, and I have no ideas and nothing interesting to say.
I'm not exactly the same way.
And Albie Singer says, so you worked something out.
Right, I've managed to achieve being shallow and unhappy.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Shallow only by his own standards. No. Despite the occasional miss, Alan's body of work is textured and truly impressive. Yet Alan says even his best films fall short of greatness.
Get back here, we're in the middle of a story.
Practically speaking, as you close in on 60.
I'm 59. I'm not closing in on 60 yet.
I would think by one interpretation that's closing in.
But I'm closing in on 59. I'll be 59 in another couple of days, and I was going to take some time before closing in on 60.
At age 59, what kind of chance do you think you have to produce that one grand slam?
I don't think I have a great chance, but not because of my age.
Put another way, if you haven't done it yet by your own lights after 25 films,
that's right.
What's the chance you'll do it ever?
I don't think the chances are great, but you never know. Just in sheer quantity, if I can keep going at the pace I'm going, I could make quite a few more films, and maybe one of them will make it.
We'll have more of Bob Costas' exclusive interview with Woody Allen tomorrow night on Dateline Wednesday.
Coming up, the last television interview with Jeffrey Dahmer.
My only objective was to find the best-looking guy that I could. I went to bathhouses. I went to bars.
What you haven't seen or heard until now. Also, can you guess what year it was? The Dateline timeline.
So what year was it? Kirkpatrick resigned. The Terminator wouldn't quit, and Born in the USA hit the charts. It all happened the last week of November, 1984.
Here now is Stone Phillips.
Few people are mourning the death of Jeffrey Dahmer, the serial killer who was beaten to death yesterday at the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin, where he was serving multiple life sentences. Just 9 months ago, I was there talking to Dahmer, and tonight you'll see some of that exclusive interview, including portions that have never been shown before. And rarely has such a criminal, some would call him a monster, spoken so vividly about what he did and why.
Time to go, Jeff. One of the main reasons for my continuing to do the things I did for so long was because I felt that I didn't have to be accountable to anybody. I just felt that you lived, you died, and that was it. There's no lasting consequences.
Chilling words from what turned out to be Jeffrey Dahmer's first and only network television interview during a visit last February with his father and stepmother in this maximum security prison.
You feel entirely relaxed?
It was only a few hundred feet from this visiting room that he was bludgeoned to death by a fellow inmate. But when we met Dahmer, he didn't seem worried about his safety.
How are things going here for you? Slow and steady. Nothing out of the ordinary, really.
And then, in the most matter-of-fact way, Dahmer began describing the gruesome impulses that drove him to kill and cannibalize 17 young men. Impulses that first surfaced with a bizarre fascination with dead animals.
In 9th grade, in biology class, we had the usual dissection of fetal pigs, and I took the remains of that home and kept the skeleton of it. And I just started branching out. Dogs, cats. I suppose it could have turned into a normal hobby like taxidermy, but it didn't. It veered off into this. Why, I don't know. There may have been some violence involved, some underlying subconscious feelings of violence. It was a compulsion, became a compulsion. I don't understand it.
Was there some pleasure in the cutting open of the animal?
Yes, there was. No sexual pleasure, but just it's hard to describe.
Sense of power, sense of control?
I suppose that's a good way of putting it, yeah.
To look at the Dahmer family's home movies, filled with innocent images of the killer as a child, is to wonder, as his parents did, how a life could go so horribly wrong. One of your dad's biggest questions is when you began to slip away, when you crossed over into this world of obsession or dark fantasy from which you just couldn't return. Can you pinpoint that?
I think it was around age 14 or 15. Started having obsessive thoughts of violence intermingled with sex. And it just got worse and worse. I didn't know how to tell anyone about it, so I didn't. I just kept it all inside.
Why do you think that was?
Because from about 15 years on up, a great deal of my thoughts were basically unshareable with anyone.
It's impossible to know why Jeffrey's obsessions progressed from roadkill to humans, but it didn't take long.
I had this reoccurring fantasy of meeting a hitchhiker on the road and of taking him hostage and doing what I wanted with him. And I never in my wildest nightmares thought that it would become a reality.
But in the summer of 1978, Dahmer came across a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks and brought him home. The house was empty. Jeffrey's parents had recently divorced, and he was home alone with no one to stop him.
I wish I just kept on going, but I didn't. I turned around, picked him up, and that's when the nightmare became a reality.
What happened after you took him to the house?
We talked, had some drinks. I knocked him out, and that was the first time.
Was this about some kind of desire to keep these people with you, not to be abandoned, not to have them leave?
I think that did play into it, but there was a big element of wanting complete control over someone, total control, not having to consider their wishes, being able to keep them there as long as I wanted, and that was a big part of it. Lust played a big part of it, controlling lust.
Did you want to try to stop?
Yes, I tried. I tried to stop.
And the killing did stop for 6 years. But Jeffrey said in 1984, while living here at his grandmother's house in Milwaukee, his violent compulsion consumed him once again. One night, cruising these bars in downtown Milwaukee, he met a young man and took him to this hotel.
I had put some sleeping pills in his drink to render him unconscious. And was just going to spend the night with him. When I woke up in the morning, my forearms were bruised, and his chest was bruised, and blood was coming out of his mouth. He was hanging over the side of the bed, and I have no memory of beating him to death, but I must have. And that's when it all started again.
And once it started again, you found it impossible to stop.
Right. That's when the obsession went into full swing. My only objective was to find the best-looking guy that I could. I went to bathhouses. I went to bars, shopping malls. Their sexual preference didn't matter to me.
Did their race matter to you?
No, the race had nothing to do with it. It was just their looks.
Was there something sexual in the dismemberment of the bodies for you?
As time went on, yes, I did get there was a sexual part to that. I started saving the skeletons and preserving other parts. And one thing led to another. It took more and more deviant type behaviors to satisfy my urges, and so it just spiraled out of control.
Why the cannibalism?
That was another step. It made me feel like they were a permanent part of me. Besides the just mere curiosity of what it would be like, it made them feel that they were a part of me, and it gave me a sexual satisfaction to do that.
Yeah, Jeff can do that. Lionel does that.
By the time this home video was shot on Thanksgiving Day 1990, the murder count was up to 9. But you'd hardly know it watching Jeffrey relax in his grandmother's living room, engaged in small talk, as if nothing much was happening in his life.
You're looking good. Grandma was saying that she thought that you got quite a bit thinner, but you look fit. I don't know.
Well, I've been surviving mostly on McDonald's food. It's just so much easier just to pop into a restaurant. But
yeah,
like I've said before, it gets too expensive, and
it does.
I have to start eating at home more.
I wish there was some way to completely get rid of the compulsive thoughts, the feelings.
So the thoughts still come to you?
Sometimes, yeah. I'll probably have to live with it for the rest of my life.
If the compulsions were inescapable, so too was the final realization that he would have to answer for his crimes.
If a person doesn't think that there is a God to be accountable to, then what's the point of trying to modify your behavior to keep it within acceptable ranges? That's how I thought, anyway. I always believed the theory of evolution is truth, that we all just came from the slime, and when we died, that was it. There was nothing. And I've since come to believe that the Lord Jesus Christ is truly God. And I believe that I, as well as everyone else, will be accountable to him.
Investigators still have no motive in the killing of Jeffrey Dahmer. The main suspect is another inmate, a convicted murderer who was working with Dahmer at the time of his death.
Coming up, the people who did this could make your life easier with this. We'll show you how in a Dateline State of the Art. Plus, punchy comments, Dateline's Picture of the Week. Dateline will continue after this message from your local station.
How'd you like to have a little help around the house? Someone to do the dishes and tidy up who's quiet and unassuming and wouldn't ask for much in return. Sounds too good to be true, but it might be in your future thanks to a technology that's turning science fiction into fact. Here's John Scott with a Dateline State of the Art.
Mike, cold roast beef?
Some French fries and a nice cold bottle of beer.
I'll see.
This is what the future looked like back in 1967.
Yes, life will be richer, easier, healthier as space-age dreams come true.
It didn't quite work out this way for frantic modern families. But now, behind this apartment door is the latest project claiming to be the home of the future. It's a 3-robot system dubbed Nancy. It does chores and makes meals in an apartment run by, of all things, NASA, the Federal Space Agency.
Kind of the idea of really trying to bring space down to Earth.
In an era of defense conversion and budget cutbacks, NASA hopes to prove its worth by showing that high-tech, high-cost space robots, like this robotic arm, can also be used for more down-to-earth projects.
And Discovery Houston, energy and ground track look good, Joe.
Aye.
The robots are equipped with voice recognition and answer back.
Nancy, are you listening?
Yes, KG.
I would like breakfast, Nancy.
Would you like waffles?
That sounds good.
They perform pre-programmed tasks like serving waffles, complete with syrup, sugar, and a strawberry. She even brings it to your table.
Thank you.
Later, Nancy wipes the table clean. Well, maybe not yet, because if the future is full of robots, it might also be full of malfunctions. Lots of malfunctions.
Nancy, are you listening? Nancy, are you listening?
Even if the bugs aren't all worked out, there's one thing these robots do know: good cutting-edge TV.
It's October 5th, 1994, and this is the Wednesday edition of Dateline.
Too bad they aren't a Nielsen family.
Tonight.
So how much would you pay for that kind of help? Well, NASA says this was just a demonstration for the media. Right now, the total cost of installing the robots in your home would be about $200,000. Jane?
Thanks, Stone. Now here's Tom Brokaw with a program note.
Thanks, Jane. Tomorrow on NBC Nightly News, do you know what these people are doing? They're training, getting ready, if necessary, to fight the United States government. And they live right here in America. Who are they? What do they want? Well, America Close-Up will have some surprising answers tomorrow on NBC Nightly News. Stone?
Thanks, Tom. Now let's take a look at some of the stories we're working on for Dateline Wednesday. What the U.S. government did to these people has been a shameful secret for 50 years.
I was told to love this country. They screwed it up.
We'll expose the kidnappings, the prison camps, and the cover-up.
Is this a deep, dark secret of this country?
Plus, can obesity one day be cured? We'll show you how a medical breakthrough may save millions of lives and reduce America's bulging waistline forever. That's on Dateline Wednesday.
Finally tonight, a press conference where words seem to fail is a natural contender for our Picture of the Week. What would a heavyweight bout be without the obligatory pre-fight hype? But last night in Las Vegas, when Riddick Bowe and Larry Donald met to do a little verbal sparring, the former champ was suddenly struck speechless. That's certainly one way to get the last word. Well, they put the gloves on for real Saturday night, at which time Larry Donald may get a chance for his rebuttal. That's Dateline for this Tuesday. I'm Jane Pauley. We'll see you tomorrow night with Dateline Wednesday at 9 o'clock, 8 Central Time. For all of us at NBC News, good night.